Okay, hello everyone. My name is Wlodek Gogloza, but that's probably is going to be rather hard for you to spell and pronounce. So I'm representing Golem Foundation, and today I'm going to talk about user-defined organization, which is our attempt at providing alternative to coin voting governance. But before I explain to you what the UDO, or user-defined organization is, let me start with explaining why we think that such an alternative is even necessary. So it's widely acknowledged that service-based internet puts users in a rather precarious position. One may even say that users are caught or kept between rock and a hard place by companies that dominate the current internet landscape. And it's not only that internet has become a fiefdom of a few large companies that each operate their own walled garden and each exploit their users in a slightly different manner. What is also problematic and what should be especially concerning to us as a community is that Web3 doesn't really provide users with a viable alternative either. It is enough to just scratch the surface a little bit to realize that coin voting, which is the most popular governance mode within the Web3 space, basically replicates the corporate economic model. It just replaces stockholders with coin holders, but it doesn't really try to tackle the fundamental problem of service-based internet, which is the misalignment of interest between users and investors. And it doesn't really matter if the investors are stockholders, shareholders, or coin holders, because whenever there is a conflict of interest between investors and users, it is usually the users that pay the price. So if the Web3 is to deliver like a viable alternative to the Googles, Facebook, and Apples of the world, we need to put users in charge of platforms that they rely on. And this is not an easy task, because it requires us to finding a way to tie governance with usage, which means that if the governance is to be token-based, which is usually the case within the Web3 space, the token generation and token distribution needs to be based on usage and usage alone. And at Golem Foundation, we are developing a model that puts these ideas into practice. We call this model user-defined organization, or UDO for short. And key concept and the basic primitive within this UDO framework is a proof of usage. It's a governance token that is generated and distributed based on the usage of a platform. But before I explain to you how this token is generated, how it is assigned to users, and what the users can do with it, let me first emphasize two key points that are underlying our design. So first, we very strongly believe that there has to be some economic cost attached to the generation of this token. And second, the token has to be non-transferable and hence non-speculative. The first condition, we believe, is necessary to raise the cost of economic attacks against the UDO. Without satisfying this requirement, gaming the system could prove to be way too easy. So you can say that, in a sense, the robustness of the UDO relies on this assumption. The second condition is necessary to ensure that governance power will stay with users and users alone, and not some outside entities who are interested in the platform from purely financial standpoint. And there are a lot of problems that may stem from the fact that token distribution does not reflect a platform usage. I will mention only two of them because I believe that these two are the most important. So the first one is low government's participation, and the second is the susceptibility to economic attacks. As for the first one, there are numbers of quite recent studies that look how DAOs are operating in practice. And the authors of these studies conclude that people who held governance tokens as purely speculative assets are very rarely involved in day-to-day operation of the organization. They very rarely vote. They are not involved in discussions on Discords or any other platform the organization is using. And when they do actually get involved in the governance, they are mostly interested or interested only in short-term gains, which is not something that is sustainable in the long run for the organization. The second problem, the second challenge, is that tradability of governance tokens opens up the organization for economic attacks with utilizing large-scale market operations. Like the most obvious example is flash loan attacks. And we are obviously well aware of the fact that making a token non-tradable, making a governance token non-tradable, doesn't mean that we are protected against all possible economic attacks. It just means that quite a lot of them are much less feasible, which should be seen as a step in the right direction. So by tying the governance with usage, we are trying to ensure that the user-defined organization will be controlled by people with skin in the game interest in its future. And also, we are trying to reduce the surface of economic attacks that can be successfully launched against it. In the end, what we really believe is that people who have practical, everyday experience in what works and what doesn't work in a platform or a service are in the best position to actually decide how the platform should be developed, what kind of features should be added, what integrations should be established, and so on. And one can say that basically everyone listens to the users. So there's nothing new in this regard with our design. And yes, it is true that you cannot be successful by ignoring your users. But I would like to emphasize that there is a huge difference between listening to users and giving them actual control over the platform. And with the UDO and the proof of usage, we definitely aim for the latter. So UDO is going to be first implemented in Wildland, which is a project that is being developed and financed by the Golem Foundation. It's a complex project, but from the end user standpoint, it's basically a very powerful data management app with a connected marketplace where users can buy cloud storage for their data. So you can imagine it as something like Dropbox, but something that is backend agnostic and has been designed with seamless data portability in mind. Wildland has a lot of other very cool, very unique features. I'm not going to go into them right now. If you're intrigued enough, just go to wildland.io and check it for yourself. Basically, what we're trying to achieve with Wildland is increase users' agency over their digital data. And we want this user-first approach to be reflected in Wildland's governance. And this is why we are implementing this UDO design in this project. And what I'm going to present to you today, in the next few slides, is the initial minimal design that we as a Golem Foundation are bootstrapping. Please note, however, and I need to stress this, that users will be able to redefine this organization if they think that it's going to be necessary. In other words, this design that I'm presenting is not set in stone. It can be changed, and if Wildland users will want to change it, they will have not only the right, but also all the necessary tools to do it. So Wildland will come with an attached marketplace where users will be able to buy storage, cloud storage for their data. And we believe that for the vast majority of users, this marketplace will be not only the default, but also the most convenient way of attaching storage to Wildland. We will be providing users with possibility of connecting their own Wildland compatible backend to the app for free. But this in the future is going to probably be most attractive to power users and maybe power users only, because it will require some know-how and some command line thinking. We will be providing users with step-by-step guides on how they can do it, but it's not going to be something like really seamless. If you ever interacted with the AWS S3 console, you know that its user interface is basically as friendly as Amazon could get away with it. So for most users, we believe that they will not bother. They will basically buy storage on the marketplace, acquire the necessary credential, and set up this backend basically with a few clicks of mouse. Most users will buy storage on this marketplace, and this is important for how we envision the proof of usage is going to be generated. So as you can see on this slide, each payment made on the Wildland marketplace is going to be divided into three parts: the service fee, the proof of usage, and the build fee. The service fee will obviously go to the service provider. That is to the provider from whom the user has bought storage for their data and who sent the credentials to the user. The proof of usage is going to be generated by swapping a part of a payment into GLM and then burning it to so that it is removed from the overall supply. This burning mechanism is going to be implemented at 1-to-1 ratio. So for every GLM burned, user will receive one proof of usage token. In other words, the more you spend on the Wildland marketplace, the more the proof of usage tokens you will receive. And we are using GLMs, which is a native token for the Golem network, because Wildland is being financed by Golem Foundation. But if someone would like to adapt this model for their own project, they can obviously use other assets for this purpose. Let me, however, remind you that we believe that burning itself, the burning mechanism itself, is a crucial element of this whole system, because basically security of it very much depends on this mechanism. If someone could generate proof of usage out of thin air, then the system would probably collapse very quickly. The third part of the payment, the build fee, will go into the build fund, from which the future development and maybe promotion of Wildland is going to be financed. And initially, we as a Golem Foundation will probably subsidize this fund with our own resources through matching funding. But we really hope that somewhere in the future, hopefully sooner than later, we will reach the level, the volume of transactions that will enable the build fund to become basically self-funded. That is going to be funded in full from the fraction of every payment made on the wildland marketplace. And all spending from this build fund will require authorization through polls conducted among the proof of usage token holders. Only users who will have the proof of usage will be able to vote in the UDO, in Wildlands UDO. The voting mechanism has not been decided yet, but we are leaning very strongly toward quadratic voting, as we believe it has a lot of interesting features that work really well with our approach. They basically strengthen our approach. Just in case, quadratic voting is a system in which users have voting credits with which they can buy votes. As a general rule, one vote costs you 1 credit. However, if you are really passionate about a subject and would like to cast more than 1 vote on this particular issue, then you have to pay extra. And this extra cost is calculated as a square of the votes casted. So if you would like to assign 2 votes to a certain proposal, you have to pay with 4 credits, 3 votes with 9 credits, 4 votes with 16 credits, and so on. As it is illustrated on this slide. Here you can see user have 10 credits. It can be 10 proof of usage token, and the user can assign them in different manners, but he has to be aware that there is an extra cost involved if he wants to put several votes on the same issue. And the beauty of this design is that it enables users not only to express their preferences, but also the intensity of their preferences. And this is why many people believe, and this is also shown by some experiments that have been conducted recently, quadratic voting is probably the best way of gauging the true interest, the true priorities of the community, which is pretty cool if you really would like to involve all users in the governance. Another cool thing about quadratic voting is that it can be seen as an anti-plutocratic measure because quadratic voting reduces the outsized influence of the large token holders. It doesn't eliminate it, but it definitely reduces it. So it's also like a pro-democratic measure in that sense. However, and this is something that everyone has to keep in mind, quadratic voting has at least one, but very serious problem, challenge, vulnerability, however you want to call it. It's very susceptible to Sybil attacks. So if you want to deploy quadratic voting in the UDO or any other system, we need to figure out how to defend against sock puppetry. And which means that we need to figure out some proof of uniqueness solution. We're not going to work on this solution on our own. We've been basically looking for what's already there. We checked several already existing solutions, and right now it looks to us that Bright ID makes the most sense. It is relatively non-obtrusive. It's relatively easy to use, especially compared to a lot of other projects within this space. And it's also, which is also very important, it is privacy preserving. So we haven't decided like on this particular issue yet, but right now it looks like Bright ID makes the most sense here. So only people who will be able to verify the uniqueness to us through Bright ID will be able to vote on how the funds from the build fund will be spent. Okay, so to sum up, with the user-defined organization, we basically want to give governance over Wildland to Wildland users. We developed proof of usage to make sure that only users will have power over the platform, and this power will stay with them and with not some outside entity. And the build fund was basically designed to ensure that users have access to a steady stream of funding that is independent from us as investors, initial investors in Wildland. So if you find this idea interesting, you can basically obviously talk to me and other people from our team, but you can also check the Wildland website. There's a paper there that explains this setup in much more detail. If you think that this is something that you can actually adapt to your own needs, or maybe if you think that you can improve on this design, which may very well be the case, go to the Golem Foundation websites, and then you will be able to check our grant program. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. If there are any questions.
Okay, I think we have a bit of time for questions. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question. I have a question if no one else wants. We got a question here.
I was wondering, with the proof of usage you use as a form of voting power, do you determine the nature of the usage? As in, do you differentiate between potential sabotage in the DAO in that way?
Okay, I only heard the first part of the question, so I'm not sure. If I'm not going to answer directly, just repeat the question again. So yeah, we've noticed that when we describe how proof of usage works within this design, many people say that this is not really a proof of usage, but proof of payment. And in a sense, that is true. But as I was trying to emphasize, in our setup, most Wildland users will probably pay for the access to the backend. So this distinction, although like in theory makes sense, in practice will be meaningless. Is this the answer for your question? Because as I said, I heard only the first part.
Yeah. My question was if you differentiate between the types of usage within the platform.
Yeah, so not within this setup, but it is also obviously possible to award proof of usage for other kind of activities. Like, for example, I can imagine that we will award proof of usage to people who contribute to Wildland, for example, by providing help to users on some of our channels, or maybe translating the documentation into different languages. But it will still require some burning mechanism, which is not included in this particular design. But yeah, you can probably assign proof of usage tokens for different kind of activities, not only for the being active on the marketplace, so to say, but buying something from the marketplace is definitely like the default way of acquiring proof of usage tokens within the Wildland.
Thank you.
I think there was a question as well over here.
Thank you. Just a quick question. How do you modulate the amount burned compared to the fee and to ensure that, as you said, there's an economical penalty, well, not penalty, but an economical aspect to it whenever the proof of usage gets minted? How do you modulate that amount?
Okay, so yeah, as I've shown you on the slide, every payment is divided into 3 parts, but the actual fraction, the actual division has not been decided yet. We basically need to do some economic research, economic modeling to figure out how this division should look like. Our intuition is that the service fee will be probably around 90%, and then the 10% of the payment will be split between the proof of usage and the build fund. But this is not something that we tested. It definitely requires some economic analysis. And right now, UDO is still a concept, something that we are still researching, that changes possible to it. So it's, at this stage, it's impossible for me to say. But also, again, the initial division will be decided by us as a Golem Foundation, but then users will be able to change it if it's necessary, or they are willing to do so. Okay, I guess you had also.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Okay, I have just one. You talk about user-defined organization. When you're thinking about this and about a user, like sometimes people do like user profiling and like defining users, but then sometimes people just say, I want this to work for every user. How do you think about this?
Yeah, user-defined for us means that the users are in complete control over the organization, that they are able to redefine it in however they would like. So I wouldn't say it's a synonymous to user-managed organization or user-controlled organization, but it has absolutely nothing to do with user profiling or something like this.
Understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, Wildland is for everyone. That's definitely for sure. Like, no question about that.
Great. Okay. If there's no more questions, then thank you very much.
Thanks.